Hey, yo, what's up, my people? This is David Uceda.
And I'm Emily Uceda.
And we just want to welcome y'all to the Habitual podcast. This podcast, it exists to be a catalyst for your self-awareness. And our heart and our goal always is to point you back to Jesus. So don't be surprised if we talk about him a lot.
We love Jesus.
We love him so much.
So much.
I call him my guy. That is my guy. But when I pray to him, I don't pray to him.
No.
I don't say my guy.
So David does this thing that drives me absolutely bonkers.
Tell the people.
He does it just to get under my skin.
Absolutely.
Among many other things. But when we go to bed at night, he always starts his prayer off with, Daddy God. And I'm just like, all right, man, get it together. I'm ready to go to sleep.
And then I'll shift it to, hey there, Lord, my name is Ashley Banks.
Oh, my gosh. So extra.
Hey, happy anniversary, baby.
Happy anniversary.
Yes. If we had
3
the
years.
applaud button right now,
Pew,
we'd
pew,
be...
pew, pew. Yes. 3 years.
3 years.
I'm proud of...
I'm proud of you too. I'm proud of us.
Yes.
We stuck around.
Yes.
I've given you plenty of reasons to leave me. Maybe not. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but
Yeah. I mean, I'm here. You know, I'm here for the long haul.
you sticking around.
Uh-huh.
I remember when we first started dating, I told you that I was looking for someone to marry so I can get papers.
Oh, my gosh.
And obviously that was a joke.
It
I
was a
wasn't
joke, for sure.
trying to be serious, but you know, I think it was pretty hilarious.
You know, so whenever David, what do they say, slid into my DMs, that's a thing.
That's not a thing. That's not what happened between us. I didn't slide in your
So,
DMs.
well, we matched on Hinge, and he is like trying to make small talk, and he's like, hey, so what are you on the site for? And I just straight up said, I'm trying to find a husband. I like that's it, you know, like, and so I was just honest from the get-go, and I thought that was funny. It's like, I'm trying to find a husband, yo.
Meanwhile, my bio said, I'm here for a good time, not a long time, Drake.
Stop. No, it didn't.
Nah.
It said some corny, like, Allstate, you're in good hands thing. Call me Allstate because you're in good hands. Ugh, so cringy. Why did I swipe right on you?
Man.
I'm just kidding. The Lord knew.
I'm gonna help all the single guys out there, and I'm gonna start a pickup line podcast.
You do not need to be doing that. Because that's you're good at a lot of things, babe.
No,
but pickup
man.
lines is not it.
No, it's definitely not. It's definitely not.
So, okay, listen, we had a little hiccup.
Oh man, that tragedy. Yeah.
It was, yeah. We're just still shaking our
Yes.
heads.
So what happened was that
What had happened was.
So we record Wednesdays, right?
Yes.
And so we were here. Today's Thursday. We were here yesterday. We recorded, and we had a beautiful conversation. I mean,
Yes,
I was
like we were crying. We
I
were
was
bearing.
bawling.
Oh my gosh.
I took the guitar out.
You didn't.
I led some worship. Y'all missed it. I mean, it was.
Tell them why they missed it.
We missed it because we forgot to save the episode.
And it deleted. So now we're back.
So we're back.
And that
Trying to make an
episode
attempt.
is never to be heard.
I mean, it was
again.
incredible. Yesterday we released the song. You know,
No, we didn't. Okay,
we wrote
you're
a
hyping
song
it up.
right in the podcast. We recorded it. You know, and we had Brandon Lake featured on it. I mean, the dude just came out of nowhere, and we had him on. So,
Okay, I'm just like
All right,
staring
I'm
at him
done.
like my eyes are glazing over.
I'm done.
Okay.
No, but it was tragic, and but we always want to look at the bright side of it. You know?
Yeah.
And we're still getting to spend, even though it wasn't our intention to spend our anniversary recording the podcast, but I think it's great because we're still getting to spend time together.
Yeah,
And today makes it even more meaningful than yesterday
it does. And it's just like,
because we're celebrating.
I was talking to David about this podcast and how I feel so passionately about it, and so does he. But one of the main perks of it is not even for, I mean, we love y'all, but not even for y'all. Like, it's for us too, getting to have intentional, uninterrupted conversation.
Yeah, and trying to build a community.
Yeah,
With
and like
all you listeners, you beautiful, beautiful people.
magnificent.
Mm-hmm.
But today, babe, do you want to kind of hit us off at what we're talking about today?
Yeah, today I actually wanted, yesterday, but we'll add it on to today. Just kind of wanted to talk about insecurities, just a fear of failure.
Yep.
Because I think that we all, to some degree, every single individual person struggles with either insecurities or a fear of failing. I think the most confident people, they're having to push that extra because they don't want to give an ounce of vulnerability that they might be
Right.
insecure. And
Well, I feel like people, myself included, that struggle with insecurities, we do tend to overcompensate in other areas.
yeah,
And we're just like searching for validation.
yeah,
And I feel like insecurities and fear of failure lead us into not so great circumstances.
Yeah,
you
for
know?
sure.
And it's like, if you get to the very root of it, like, I mean, when we're feeling insecure and when we're fearing failure, we're looking at ourselves only.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and so we're kind of like idolizing ourselves, and
Yeah, for sure.
you know, and so it just puts us out of perspective. We make choices we don't want to. We have thoughts we don't want to. And I just don't feel like that is God's will for our life and for our thoughts and
Yeah, for
how
sure.
we operate.
Yeah, and the goal is always, right, to no longer be insecure, to no longer feel like you're
To
a
live
failure.
my best life.
Right. And that's so much easier said than done. But I think that's why grace is also holding tension for us in our lives between getting rid of insecurities and feeling like a failure and being able to move over to being confident and being secure.
Right.
And
being able to love a part of yourself. Like Jesus loves you. He died for you.
yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
and one of my prayers has always been like, Lord, don't let me take your sacrifice in vain. You know, your outpouring of love, don't let me take advantage of it, and don't let me forget how valuable I am because of what you did.
Yeah.
I wanted to share a story about fear of failure in my own life that ended up not so great for me. So I've been at Costco for a little over 6 years, but before then I had worked at Nothing But Cakes for almost 10 years, 10 years, something like
Yeah.
that. And my boss, well, the owner of that branch of Nothing But Cakes, Kathy Bonds, I love you so much.
We adore her.
Yes. So
She's awesome.
yeah, she like catered our wedding too, like for the cake. But I consider her, even to this day, like a friend, a mentor, almost like a motherly guide in my life.
Yeah.
Like she has helped to develop me into who I am today. But anyways, I was working at Nothing But Cakes, and I kind of hit this wall where I felt like the Lord was telling me to go. It was time to move on.
Yeah.
And I was so comfortable there. And I loved Kathy. Like, this is her livelihood, and I
Right.
had the honor of helping her.
Yeah.
And even Kathy knew, because I think I had expressed that to her at one point, like, hey, I don't know how much longer I'm going to stay. I think it's about time. But I did not listen to the Lord in that moment. And I stayed, and I was going against the grain. And it's like everything got so much harder in my life and in my job. And, you know, I ended up getting to one of the darkest places in my life in that season. And I was like breaking out in hives, having stomach issues, panic attacks, and I just could not function. And I just remember, like, I did end up getting fired because everything, just my work ethic, everything went down the garbage.
Yeah.
And I think I was just trying to do it in my own strength, and I could not do it, and yeah. So that really is an example of fear of failure really getting the best of me in my life. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yes. So what do you feel like? What do you feel like because you held on longer than what you feel like you should have? What do you think were the results? I know you kind of just shared about. What you were feeling and the reaction, right? The hives and all those things. But do you feel like there was something that you lost because you stuck around longer than what you felt like you needed to?
I don't know about lost, but I definitely felt like I was going out of alignment.
Yeah.
So for instance, like as it progressed and I stayed and I didn't want to take that step and leave, like I started getting more anxious and more depressed, and we know God, we know that he's with you always.
Right.
But it got to where I felt such darkness, I did not feel his presence.
Yeah.
And he doesn't take it from us.
Of course.
But the night that I got fired, I remember a specific shift. Like I went from panicking and feeling completely overtaken by just darkness to when I got fired, then it became sorrow. And I feel like the Holy Spirit just like rushed in that moment, and I was able to grieve. And because it's so important to grieve different seasons of your life, what you thought your life was going to look like, all that stuff, And so then it ended up turning out really beautiful because the Lord totally spoke to me more in that valley than when I was doing great. Like that's the season where I really learned God's love for me.
Yeah.
Like I formed a history with the Lord in that season. So, he did turn it around to be good, but I think there was a lot of my own suffering in there that I brought upon myself.
Yeah.
Because I had this massive fear of failure, not just for myself, but letting other people down.
Right.
Yeah.
Which tends to be the driving force for insecurities and failure tends to be people pleasing.
Yeah, it can be.
9 times out of 10, because we live in a society, and I feel like for me as a leader in church, I feel like as also somebody who is being discipled but also disciples others, that there is a sense of standard that I need to live by.
Yeah.
And I feel that sometimes that standard tends to, if I feel like I'm not living to that standard, then I automatically identify as I'm failing, I'm lacking.
Right.
And I think the reality is, one thing that I'm learning is that those standards, I place them upon myself because God doesn't call me to a standard besides to believe in him, accept him as my Lord and Savior, and just be his child.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't ask for us whenever we feel burdened. He says, hey, take on my burden because it's lighter.
It's light. My yoke is easy and my burden is
light.
And
so I think because I know for me and my self-awareness, I've come to identify that I've struggled for many years for people pleasing.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of my ability to serve stems from people pleasing. As a pastor's kid, growing up as a pastor's kid, there was always this image that people gave you because you were the son of the pastor. You are a child of the pastor. And because the pastor is the leader of the church, you are next in line. So there's this image that people portray on you. Yeah. It's a pedestal that they place you on. And I feel like as a child in those times, right, 14, 13, 15, already serving at multiple capacities in church, I didn't want to let anybody down.
Yeah.
I didn't want to let my parents down. I didn't want to let any leaders down. I didn't want to give my parents a reason. And this is the narrative that I created for myself. I don't want to give my parents a reason to be disappointed in me.
Right.
And so whatever
you
was
wanted their approval.
I would do anything to get their approval because I always felt like the only time they were proud of me was when I was doing some type of church capacity.
Yeah.
And
Which
so
is sad.
Yeah, it is. But it's definitely something that I took hold of, you know, and I kind of flipped it and made it think it's for good reason. And it's just crazy how much your insecurities and your fear of failing people will cause you to create a world in your head where it is a situation that is valid and it's not.
Yeah. So I remember when we first started dating and first got married, you would spend the entire Sunday at church. And you're like, it seemed like if you weren't here, you felt like you were so guilty of this like awful crime. And
I'd get hives.
Yeah. Right? You're like, I'm not at church. Oh my gosh.
Right.
And then here I come and I'm like, I'm hungry. Let's go to lunch.
Right.
Like, let's, Sundays, and especially after we got married, Sundays were really all we had.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just was like, why is he picking this?
Yeah.
Why does he not want to go out and, spend time with me? And like, we can still love Jesus and go out to lunch, And, yeah, and it was just a tricky thing because it's like, ooh, I don't want to like bring you away from Jesus.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It definitely is a tricky situation because it's like it could quickly get shifted to a negative of just like, why are you trying to hold me back from serving at church? And it's like, that's super toxic.
Right. But at the same time, I think you realized like how much energy and we're not saying that it's bad to serve in church. Like we
No,
are
absolutely not.
Definitely pro-church. We love coming together as a family.
I mean, you and I serve at a high capacity even till today in our church.
But we can do that without being here from beginning to 5 in the afternoon.
And I think the reason why was because my driving force was to not feel like a failure.
Yeah.
As opposed to now, I can still serve at that capacity.
Right.
Out of enjoyment.
And it's like,
contentment.
but the thing is, like, if you don't have boundaries in place in your life, you trying so hard not to be a failure in one area will cause you to fail in another. Yeah. And so one thing specifically I remember about you is you would give everything your all on Sunday, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, I think anyone that attends our church, like, loves whenever you're in front of them, like in some capacity. But then Monday, you're calling into work.
Yep. Because my body is shot.
Like your body hurts, your feet hurt, your voice is gone.
Yeah.
You have nothing else to give.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
And I think once we really started working, and when we initially started working on our marriage, it was not because it was bad. It was because we valued each other and we wanted to build it. We knew that marriage was something that you grow.
For sure.
And so I think once you started realizing kind of those habits that would happen, probably because I would point them out and be like, see, you sleep in. That's why you sleep in. Because, but I think you naturally was like, okay, let's set some boundaries to protect myself and you.
Yeah.
And so, there's so many. And one thing I say is like, the things that we do are not always bad, but check your heart.
Yeah.
Why are you doing those things? What's driving it? And
what's the motivation?
Of course, like there's some things that you don't want to do. Like for me, it's go to work.
Right.
Like I feel like if I check my heart before work, I'm always angry.
Yeah. I wish I could get paid just breathing.
Yeah.
Like every breath was $22 an hour.
I know what you want to get paid for, and it's just going and sitting at every Black Rock in the nation. Like that's what you want to do. Any coffee shop.
Or just valuate coffee shops.
Yeah.
That'd be my dream
Work
job.
on tracks. Like,
Right.
he loves that.
But this is where I realized that rest was so much more important than being active, is because last summer, between June and August,
Yes.
I had heard from the Lord to rest, right?
Ooh, that was hard for you, though.
That was tough because he told me, I don't want you to serve at any capacity. I don't want you to take any form of pay from the church or anything.
Which that
take
in itself
anything
was
from
a
the church.
sacrifice. Like,
Right. But he told me that he would supplement that pay.
and he did.
Which he did, which was beautiful.
Mind-blowing, yeah.
And so he supplemented that pay at work. I was able to work extra hours. Which
Like
was,
it just opened up. Like
Right.
you automatically started having to do that.
Right, yeah. And so and it was awesome. Like it was great to hear that. But to just sit down, and he told me, I don't want you to serve at any capacity. And I said, so what is it that you're asking me to do? And he said 2 things. He said, I want you to just focus on worshiping me. And I want you to focus on leading Emily in worship from the pews.
Yes, which I love when I get to worship next to you.
And those 2 months were some of the hardest months of just not doing anything but just sitting down. And it's weird because all I've ever done was serve at the church. And now I'm in a place where it's not that I made the decision.
Yeah.
God told me to do it.
Well, I think too at that point, the Lord had also said he wants to just be your friend,
Yeah.
you know? And like he wanted to teach you another way
Yeah.
of being in relationship with him.
Yeah. And so the way that happened was that after these 2 months, I remember driving to work one day and I was praying, and he had said, do you want to know why I asked you to sit down for 2 months? And I was like, I mean, I figured it was to rest. I know that I was serving a lot. And he said, no, that's not the reason why. He said, when was the last time that you had an encounter with me? When was the last time that you had a conversation with me? And I was like, I genuinely tried to remember, and I couldn't. And he said, you know, since you've been in church, all you've been is on autopilot. And he said, your relationship with me is like bubble gum, where all you've been doing is chewing, and you don't remember when the flavor went away. That's how your relationship has been with me. And he said, and it's sad to say most people in the church share that same, are in that same place.
Just autopilot. You like have it like, this is what I'm supposed to do, so I'm going to do it. But sometimes we don't stop and like have the self-awareness.
Right.
Of like, and that's something that has been so hard for me too. Like not church related, but like in therapy. So as you know, I lost the baby in, when was it? June? June. I lost the baby, had to get surgery. But around the time that I got pregnant, there were like 3 or 4 of my friends that were also pregnant, and we were all kind of in the same time frame, you know? And just recently, probably last month, all the baby showers started happening.
Yeah.
Just one after the other. And I went to one, you know, but then I did notice my mood just dropped afterward. And I wasn't aware enough to realize why until therapy. And my therapist just asked me, why are you going to baby showers? And I was like, what do you mean? These are my friends. Like, I can celebrate them. And she's like, but you can celebrate them.
Yeah.
But if they love you, they will understand. You know, and the first time I told one of my friends after that I wasn't going to come to the baby shower, but I was going to support them, send them a present, and root them on from the sidelines. She was so graceful. And it's like all this time, I didn't realize that no one expected me to show up after that had happened.
Yeah.
But I kind of forgot the point of what I was talking about. But that was a hard pill to swallow because it was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to let these people down.
Well, that you set this expectation of that I have to be at all these baby showers. And your therapist is telling you, you don't have to do that if you don't feel like you're ready to attend these events, and you can still celebrate your friends in other ways just as equal as you being there in person.
Right. And so it's just crazy that had never occurred to me. You know, I even I get weirded out even talking about it now because I'm like, that's so wrong. How dare you? You know?
Yeah.
So I'm definitely feeling uncomfortable, but I think it was a good choice for me.
Yeah. And
I did start attending I went to another baby shower after a little time after I wasn't so triggered, but I left before the presents.
Yeah.
When they started bringing out all the cutesy onesies, and that's when I was like, okay, it's time to go.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. I'm thankful to have that awareness now of just to be gentle with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
Yeah. And that's definitely been a very that's probably this miscarriage season has been a test of our ability to trust in the Lord and not fill our heads up with that we were incapable or that it was our fault.
Yeah.
Because that played a huge role for both of us. I think we both felt like it was our fault.
Yeah.
And that was tough, and we had to let that go. And the day that I chose to let that go, I remember I was on my way to work praying, and I was trying to pray, and I just couldn't. And I remember just telling God, you know what? I'm just going to be real with you, man. I don't trust you right now. I just don't. Yeah. I don't trust you, because where were you when this happened?
Yeah.
I needed you. Yeah. I even yelled out for you in the car the night that I found out.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear you.
Right. I definitely, my faith has been tested for sure.
Yeah.
You know, and I do feel a little insecure in my faith right now. You know, just because I feel like I am not hearing from God. You know, and it's just hard. You know, and one of my friends, Angela, we were kind of talking about that. And she was talking about, like, when you're going on a road trip, you really hear from the GPS when you're pulling out of your neighborhood and get on this road and then get on this road. But once you get on that highway, you can go, 700 miles without hearing that voice. And the moment you get off, if you were to get off, like it reroutes you back, or when you're almost to the destination, then you hear the voice again, guiding you where to go. And I don't like this stretch.
Yeah.
It's not comfortable.
No.
It's like, I need to take a pee break, or like.
Exactly.
It's like, I need to hear that voice again.
Right.
And, but at the same time, I guess we're going in the right track because he hasn't spoken to be like, no.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's just like that long suffering. But in that stretch, there's insecurities that come up of like, am
Absolutely.
I capable of hearing from God anymore?
Yeah.
Am I still a believer?
Yeah.
Like,
sure.
Am I still doing things right? And so, I think this podcast has been so healing already. We're only 2 episodes in, and there's healing going on.
Absolutely.
Because I know that the Lord is using us.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I shared this last night that I spoke in our youth ministry, was that I'm in a season of delayed gratification.
Yeah.
And where I'm having to, because I had a conversation with God a couple of months ago, and it's always on my way to work. It's always in the mornings.
That's your time.
That's my time. Because it's like an hour to get to work. And so I try to be as intentional with that time as I can. And I remember him telling me, I'm so pleased with you.
Yeah.
It's like you've been putting in the work and you've been doing the hard things. And
you cried like a baby when you heard that.
I remember, because I've never heard that. Unfortunately, I've never heard that from my own parents.
It's something your soul needed.
Exactly. And so I remember him telling me, and I'm so proud of you. And he said, but I need you to finish this season and I need you to finish this season strong. And I remember telling him, but this is hard. This is way too hard. Having to accept certain things, accept my mistakes, own up to my mistakes. This is hard, and I don't want anymore. I don't want to have to do this anymore. And I remember him telling me, I know this is hard. And he said, but you're just not ready yet for what I have for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, I have to keep those doors closed for you because it wouldn't be my kindness to let you walk through something that you're not ready for.
Oof. Yeah. He was being kind by not opening the door yet.
By not opening the door. And sometimes we feel like, God, where was God? I'm praying for this door to open and it's not open. And sometimes we think that God is being very unfair when really God is actually fighting for us.
Mm-hmm.
Because he knows that
his ways are higher.
Right. And so if we knew what God knows, we wouldn't pray the prayers that we pray. So sometimes if God doesn't answer a prayer, sometimes he's trying to protect us from something.
Right.
And sometimes the prayers that we're asking for, there may be times where those prayers are not what we need.
Yeah. Or just something that doesn't line up.
Right. And so we tend to think in our humanity, we tend to think in our heads, if he's not answering, it's because I'm doing something wrong. There's the insecurity.
Right.
If he's not answering, it's because maybe I'm not praying enough. Maybe I'm not reading the word enough. Maybe I'm not spiritual enough.
Right.
And the reality is, no, he's actually just trying to be a good dad.
Yeah.
And protect you from something that if you were to walk into would be detrimental to you.
Yeah.
And so that's...
And so tell me, have you noticed how crazy growth you've had in your character just since that word?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's been the hardest conversation I've ever had with God, and yet it's been the most freeing conversation I've ever had with God.
Yeah, because I think it satisfied you in that moment of okay, yeah, he's working.
It did, because then I asked him, okay, and then I told him, I said, okay, I understand. I don't like what you're telling me, but I'm going to be obedient.
Yeah.
And I remember him telling me, see, this is why I'm so pleased with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, what do you need me to do? And he said, be faithful where you are with what I've given you.
Yep.
With your job, with your marriage, your friendships, everything that you have that is within your control, just stay faithful to it.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I've been faithful to you. And you'll know when it's time. But for now, just stay faithful right where you are.
Yeah.
And that was really, really hard, but I got to see his character in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I got to see not just his kindness, but I got to see his correction. And I got to see he was, how would I put it, as a father.
Yeah, daddy God. No, just kidding.
But those three aspects of him is what I came to understand about him, that I know now when I walk confidently knowing that he is kind. I walk confidently knowing that when he corrects me, it's because he loves me. Mm-hmm. And I walk confidently knowing that even if there is a lack in my Father here, I can always trust that my Father in heaven is even greater.
Yeah.
And that is sufficient for me.
Yeah. And that's beautiful, because sometimes the Lord, not sometimes, all the time, the Lord fills the gaps in your life.
Absolutely.
Like say that you lost your mom, right? I fully believe the Lord would be tender like a mom to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. But
of course.
He is what you need.
Absolutely.
Yep. Everything that you need is found in him.
He is our substance.
Yeah.
He is our sustenance. He is everything that we could ever want, dream, or live for.
Yeah.
That is who God is.
I love Jesus.
Yeah. And so, and yeah, it's been a tough road, but God truly has been faithful. And I think the more we challenge ourselves to be vulnerable, the more we challenge ourselves to just be transparent and not really care what anybody thinks. I just care about what God thinks of me.
Yeah.
And if God tells me that he's well pleased with me and who I am and where I'm at in life, no one's voice, not even the enemies, could ever bring me down, because I know that he's pleased with me.
Right.
And that's sufficient enough to carry me to eternity.
Yeah.
Just knowing, because wasn't that Jesus in the 3 years of his ministry? I'm pretty sure God only spoke once, and it was when he was being baptized and the Holy Spirit came upon him, right? Then the sky opened up and he said, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased."
I never realized it was one time.
I'm pretty sure it was one time.
Well, scholars out there, don't judge us,
Yeah,
okay?
right.
But
it wasn't even a handful of times that God spoke. Even when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane.
But he still broke away from the crowd so many times to just go spend time with him,
to go spend time with him too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And absolutely. There was even a case where they were trying to force him to be the king of Jews.
Right. And he's like,
yep, exactly. And so what I'm trying to get at is that sometimes all we need is just that one moment, that one word from him.
Just
and
to
it's not
keep you going.
And it's not a prophetic word. It's just a reminder that he is pleased in us.
Right.
I think sometimes we can over spiritualize things, and I need a prophetic word and I need this. Sometimes we just need to be reminded that he's well pleased and that he loves us.
Yeah.
And that's enough to carry us through the hardest times of life.
Yeah.
And so there's so many. It's crazy because that we're talking about insecurities and failure, because how many Bible figures we can read about are so highly insecure.
I feel like all of them were insecure.
Pretty much every single one, right?
Yeah.
And
underqualified, insecure.
A handful of people were pretty confident and did it well to the very end.
Yeah.
But most of them were highly insecure. And I think that's what I love about Paul, because Paul was always very vulnerable about his struggles, things that he has to go through, things that he's learned.
If Paul was alive, we would definitely have him on the Habitual podcast.
Right.
So what was it like murdering Christians? How do you feel about that?
Right. And so I just think the Bible is riddled with stories of highly insecure people who failed time and time again, and yet God continuously restored them. And he restored them because they recognized that they were wrong, and they repented of their ways, and they confessed what was going on, right? So we look at like David, when he confesses what he's done is wrong about sending Uriah off to war, marries Bathsheba, and all the many things that he did. When he confessed it, that's when he was able to stand back up and be able to be redeemed.
Yeah.
And so I think...
let me just clarify for some people that might not know that story. David was, what was he, like the king at that time?
He was the king of Israel.
Yeah, king of Israel at the time. And he really wanted to be with Bathsheba, but she was married.
Well, he was lusting
lusting over Bathsheba.
He saw her showering. He saw her showering and fell in love.
Then he purposely and manipulatively sent the husband off to war so that he would be killed. And then he was able to be with Bathsheba.
Right.
So that's definitely...
Was it out of her choice? Probably not.
Probably not. That's biblical times. We don't know how that went.
I'm pretty sure it was not her choice. And...
I mean, did she want her husband to be murdered on the battlefield? Probably not. No.
But what I'm trying to get at is just examples of people who were highly insecure, and until they confessed what was happening on the inside, and that's where I really want to try to get to the point of what I'm saying, is that if you feel that you are insecure, if you feel like you're constantly feeling like you're failing all the time, that's something that you need to bring to the Lord and say it. Don't just assume that he hears everything. He knows everything, right? But just because he hears and he knows, that doesn't mean that he doesn't still want you to bring it to him.
Yeah.
And vocalize it.
Yeah. It's like a mom and like the kid is like, bah, 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 bah. And she's
use
like,
your words.
Use your words.
Use your words.
I feel like God's like, use your words.
That's basically how we are 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
And we don't say nothing. We just keep.
I know. They can't see our facial expressions.
Right.
They just hear.
Oh, man.
I have another story that I want to share about what's going on in therapy for me.
Mm-hmm.
So last week I saw my therapist, and some people might be familiar with this, but we do something called EMDR. It's called
It's like electric shock, ain't it?
No, it's
Don't they
not
like-
electroshock. I'm not getting, what is it, lobotomy? No, it stands for eye movement, EMDR, something.
Eye movement.
Okay, let me just explain it. So when you are in your deepest sleep, it's called a REM sleep. I think a lot of people know that. When you are in REM sleep, that's when you're processing most of the things from your day.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine a file cabinet. And when you go into that REM sleep cycle, you open up the file cabinet and you sort everything that happened that day into the proper file. When trauma happens or anything that just messes with your nervous system, that file cabinet gets jumbled. And so instead of like going in the right spot, when you go to wake up, it just like crams shut and things are not in the right places. You're not thinking properly, functioning properly. You're having a lot of like triggers. That's what triggers come from, essentially, is a dysregulated nervous system and trauma of some sort. And so what EMDR does is it copies that eye movement of when your eyes are going back and forth in REM sleep. And it's called bilateral stimulation. And so for some reason, the right side and the left side of your brain.
You're putting me in a REM sleep right now.
Stop. There's some people that are like brain nerds.
No, you're right.
That will love to hear this.
I'm sorry.
But so pretty much you are opening up your file cabinet in EMDR therapy, filing traumas and different things where they need to go so that your file cabinet shuts properly. Because like a lot of times if you have unresolved trauma and you need to like get something out of your file cabinet, you like open it, like grab it out and slam it shut because you don't want to deal with what's in there because it's so disorganized. And so anyways, you kind of start with a statement. So I read a list of phrases and I chose which one resonated with me the most. And it was the statement that said, there is something wrong with me. Like that is such an underlying belief that I have about myself in so many areas of my life. And we were able to go through it. And at the beginning, I felt like that statement was 10 out of 10, true. And at the end, I felt, that's actually not true at all. There's not something wrong with me and I am fine the way that I am.
Yeah.
But so something that she told me last week was this next week to just check myself and see if that statement is still true in all other areas of my life. And the one area that I am just not believing that statement is my weight. Whenever it comes to there is something wrong with me and that I'm fine the way I am, I do not believe that about my weight. I think there's a lot of just shame and just almost like, I don't want to say self-hatred because that's super harsh, but just like disgusted with myself.
Yeah. It's like negative talk.
Yeah, just that negative self-talk of just, and even like we're about to start filming these sessions so you can actually see us. And I'm already like, oh gosh, the camera adds 10 pounds. I don't need that, and so
10 pounds of fine.
Thank you, babe. Thank you.
Fancy face.
You're right. And so she challenged me with this of like being able to separate the good, beautiful inner things of myself with the outer. And it's like two things can be true. I can have a deep love for myself and be unhappy with what's happening on the outside.
Yeah.
And that does not mean that my value is decreasing or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I'm working on. And it goes directly into insecurities.
Yeah.
They're just there sometimes. But I realize the insecurity is hindering me from things like, and hold on, I got to take a sip of water because I'm getting like which is like, ugh, so cringy. I hate when I hear podcasts like that.
You didn't have to do it to demonstrate.
You're right. People probably understand.
It's an ick.
It is a total ick. I hate when I hear people just with
Don't do
dry
it again.
mouths.
Yeah.
But on my train of thought, shoot, I was going to say something after that, but it just kind of poofed.
How much you love me?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, just so much.
Mm-hmm.
You're amazing.
I think that was basically all that you were gonna say.
No, I was going to say something else, but it'll come back. Holy Spirit will bring it back if I need to talk about it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Man.
Do you have stories?
I do, and it's just it's a tough one.
Yeah, share with us.
It's a tough one because it's something that I've been sitting on lately, and it's just kind of going towards this fear of failing. I realized a couple of months ago that I struggle with people pleasing, and that stems from my childhood of being at times ignored emotionally.
Yeah.
Whenever I had a problem.
Yeah.
It
just
was
pray
always,
about it.
It was always just pray about it.
Yeah. Give it to God.
Right. And so you learn to just compartmentalize your emotions.
Yeah.
And,
like you don't have permission to have
right.
them.
And you suppress them. And you suppress them for so long that you start finding the best way that I can describe it is you compartmentalize all your emotions, so you suppress them, right? Think of yourself pushing them down. Well, you realize that there's so much pressure that you're not strong enough to hold them down.
It's
so
going
now
to come out one way or another.
But what you end up doing is you start finding weights to put on it to hold it down.
Okay.
And sometimes those weights come in actions. And so this people pleasing and this compartmentalizing and suppressing all my emotions, I've heard it this way, that what doesn't come out of your mouth will come out of your body and actions,
Yeah.
And I was already dealing with porn at the time.
Yeah.
So I became very highly promiscuous. And I was always, every relationship that I was in.
Before we were married, by the way. He's talking before we were married.
Yeah. And so I remember that I was so highly promiscuous in my teens. And I struggled so much with just always wanting to have sex and always wanting to fill this void in me, this void of that I was dealing with neglect. And I didn't know at the time. I wasn't in an environment where somebody could relate with me or help me.
Which also, I just want to put this in there. A lot of times, sexual addictions and stuff like that, of course, they can come from sexual abuse, but it can also come from emotional abuse or neglect.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, for sure. And so I just remember that my promiscuity got so bad that in my early 20s, in 3 occasions, I met with prostitutes. And I never fully went through with it. But I remember in 2 occasions, I got to the location and then I was just like, this is stupid. And I left.
Yeah.
The 3rd occasion, I actually got into the hotel room. And I remember sitting on the bed and the lady was in the bathroom. And I remember just kind of looking around. My hands are touching the bed. And I'm just like, I just realized, I'm like, what is going on? Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And the conviction, I like to think it was the conviction of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
That made me fearful. And so I remember just getting up and leaving. And I never looked back again.
Right.
And
praise God.
It just made me realize how deep my insecurities, how deep my fear of feeling like a failure, it dug this hole that was like really deep,
Yeah.
And so I just remember just always feeling shame all the time, just always being full of shame. And I would hide it by serving at church.
Yeah.
And smiling and leading worship, but I was so full of shame, you know, and it was like this facade that I would give off whenever I was on stage leading worship. It was always this facade because deep down inside, I felt like trash.
Yeah.
And I remember one Sunday, just kind of like I was already at a point where I didn't want to lead worship that Sunday. And so I asked somebody else to take my spot. And I remember that Sunday I was in the sound booth. And I was just like, this is my last day in church. Because
that's what sin does. It disconnects you from God.
And so what ended up happening was that I remember telling myself, I'm done with church. And I'm telling God, it's not your fault. But I don't want to keep feeling like I need to make you proud.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I keep failing in that area.
Yeah.
And I remember I was so emotional. I got down on my knees and I started crying. And I heard God's audible voice tell me, I've never given up on you. I've always been here. Why are you willing to give up on me?
Oh, yeah.
I've always been here and I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Give me a chance.
Yeah.
Give me another try. Just give me another chance.
Oh,
I promise you I won't let you go, but you can't let me go.
that's so sweet.
And I remember in that moment just saying, okay. And I repented and I asked the Lord for forgiveness. But that shame still kind of, it's still carried.
It's a habit. It really is. It's a learned behavior that you are used to having that discomfort.
It's this habitual habit, right? Which is what this podcast is really based on. It's calling out the habitual habits that we have in our lives. That sometimes we go on living life, not realizing that these habits play a significant role in your life.
Yeah.
And so
choices, your soul is your thinker, picker, and feeler. Everything that you think, everything you pick, everything you, thinker, and everything you feel is all from your soul. So depending on how well your soul is, that everything is going to come from that, you know?
Right. And so it's crazy because then my thought was, if I just keep serving, it'll go away.
You're like, I'm going to outwork this thing.
Yo, I straight up set myself up for failure big time because lo and behold, none of those things went away. And it's interesting because I heard God's audible voice in that moment. He told me he would stick by me. And I thought...
Wait, you heard his audible voice?
Like I heard his voice speak to me.
Like with your ears or with your heart?
I don't remember if it was in my ears or heart. I don't even know if that's how it worked. I just heard his voice. I don't know if that was in my heart.
Yeah.
I don't think my heart has ears, baby.
No, but like some people hear the audible voice of God where like, it's like, David, here I am.
Who told you that that's what his voice sounded like?
I just assumed, you know.
This is your father.
I feel like
your Lord and God.
I feel like he'd be like, what, Triton off of The Little Mermaid,
You know what it almost felt like?
Dad?
It was almost as if, this might sound creepy, I don't care. It almost sounds like I was talking to Uncle Roger. From Uncle Roger's Neighborhood. Would you be mine? Would you be mine?
That's not
Won't
Uncle
you
Rogers.
Be my neighbor?
That was Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Roger, Uncle Roger. Mr. Roger.
Rogers.
Uncle Roger.
I was like,
that was a dude from the hood that I knew. That's what it was. That's somebody's uncle from the hood.
It's the off-brand of Mr. Rogers.
But it was almost as if I was talking to Mr. Rogers. Like it was like that soft,
very gentle,
empathetic voice. It was very, very empathetic.
Yeah.
It was like the best way I could say it. It was as if, the best way that I could describe it is that it was a very empathetic voice. Mm-hmm. It was very
Did you feel
calm.
Fear when
I
you
didn't.
heard it?
I actually felt comfort.
Yeah. Oh.
Like that's how I knew it was him.
Yeah.
Because I felt comfort.
Yeah.
And so it was something that
I'd
was
be scared probably.
I'll never forget it. It was the most restful voice I've ever heard.
Oh.
And it was calming and it was empathetic and it was caring. And
I, being kind of the hypochondriac that I am, would probably think I was schizophrenic.
Right.
And be like, I need to be admitted. I'm hearing voices.
No, but it was clearly, it was from the Lord.
Yeah.
And so I found it crazy that this moment happens, such a significant moment in my life. I've never heard God's voice before.
Yeah.
And it was at the lowest point of my life in that moment of my life.
Yeah.
The absolute lowest. And it was so low that it was at the point of where I was going to give up going to church.
Yeah.
And I told myself, I'd rather not be in church and not have to make him proud and just do what I want.
Right. Because you're like, I'm going to fail him anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I even try?
Right.
And I think too, oh my gosh, this is a whole other can of worms, but marriage, relationships, all of this stuff. How many times do you just walk away because you're like, I don't have anything good to offer. I'm going to fail them anyways.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da. It's different with like if it's a toxic relationship, or if there's any type of abuse.
But here's what I've learned with that.
Yeah.
Because
With
we can confidently say I've hurt you one or two, 3 times.
Yeah.
With my screw ups.
Yeah.
And one thing that I have learned is
I wouldn't consider it abuse.
No,
just
not
like
no.
own...
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Just
me, just for the record.
Me hiding something and you finding out about it.
Yes.
So me telling you, no, I'm not watching porn, and then you finding out I'm watching porn.
Me. Yeah.
So basically just betraying, your trust.
Yeah.
Is what I'll say. And initially you would get upset and my response was to leave.
Right. Or just not even look at me. You couldn't even look at me.
But there was one instance that I learned moving forward. There was one instance where I wanted to leave. And the Holy Spirit said, no, you stay and hug her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how? In my head, I'm like, I'm the one that hurt her.
Yeah.
And he said, just hug her. And I remember walking up to you and I sat down. It was the first time I've never walked away. Yeah. And I chose to sit down and embrace you and hug you and say, I'm sorry. And he worked as the comforter through the one who hurt you.
I know. And that's such a wild thing.
So it's like when we think about him being the comforter, he will use the person who did the hurt.
Yeah.
If we're willing to lean in and stay close instead of walking away.
Yeah.
And I think this could help so many marriages that go through arguments and conflict if the man is willing to just stick around instead of walking away and embrace her and say, I'm sorry, and hold her.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit will use that and will comfort her as if he is physically there.
Yeah.
Through the person who hurt her because he's choosing.
Not all the time, but in that situation.
Right. But
absolutely.
But I'm on a roll here. Let me finish.
Yes, I know.
So,
but some men might try this and they're going to get punched in the face.
Well, I mean, that's honestly, that's a risk I'm willing to take because I could take a hit. That's fine. But what I'm saying is if we choose to let go of our pride, because a lot of the reason why we walk away is because we're full of pride.
Yeah.
It's prideful of us because us in our heads as men, we think when we hurt, I don't want to deal with this.
Right.
This is too much for me. I don't even want to be in the same room because this is too much for me. And in fact, the reality is you are capable enough to sit in the room, even though you did the hurt, for you to sit in the room.
And uncomfortable.
And it'll get awkward and it'll be uncomfortable. But the more that we learn to practice to get past our pride and just stick around and lean into the hurt, I think God will use that and glorify himself through that. But we have the notion and the instinct to just say, this is too much for me and I'm going to walk away. And that's cowardly.
Right. Ooh, you better preach.
That is very cowardice for men to sit there and stand and say, and I'm speaking this highly from experience. I'm not trying to say this as somebody who has this perfectly, but I will say that from there on out, I've chosen to stick around and bite my tongue and say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And say, I didn't mean to hurt you and hug you and embrace you. And the Lord has brought peace in our home through that moment of me choosing to lean in and bite my pride and just stick around.
Yeah.
And so we just, again, those are habitual habits. I'm talking about just men in particular. These are habitual habits that we tend to do when there's conflict. We walk away from it.
Avoidance is what it is.
We choose to avoid it instead of leaning into it.
Yeah.
If it bothers you, ask yourself, why is this bothering me?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, this is bothering me, I'm out.
Right.
Instead of being, we tend to treat it like that SpongeBob meme. All right, I'm gonna head out.
I'm going to head out.
And it's like,
But what about,
be curious.
yeah. What about when there's a lot of anger in the air? Oh. Excuse David's alarm clock if y'all heard that.
That was so bad. That's my alarm clock in the mornings, everyone. It's that goat sound.
And I don't even wake up for it.
Nope.
I'm knocked. I am fully knocked out.
Yeah.
But what about when there is a whole bunch of anger mixed in with that? Like, what? I think it just is going to take individual wisdom. Like, you're going to have to ask the Lord, because there are situations where you do just need some space to just calm down.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
But I think there's, like, it's so easy in that moment to be like, let's both just take 10 minutes.
Okay. So
like, let's calm down.
So I'm going to add to that.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Most of the time, when we've calmed down, we think it's over.
Right, but it's not. Like,
and it's
so you
not.
have to go back around and talk
We
about
owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to our spouse, that once we calm down, that we sit down and say, can we talk about it?
Right. Like the other night, I forgot what I was mad about, but you were like, do you want to talk about it? And I'm like, no, not right now.
And I said, okay.
And then we watched an episode.
10, 15 minutes later, you're like, okay, I'm ready to talk about it.
And I paused the TV and I said, okay, I'm ready to talk about it.
But this is what we have to do in order to get through conflict in marriage. Because if not, all we're going to have is unresolved conflict.
Right.
Is what we will have. That unresolved conflict becomes resentment.
Right. And for me, I err on the emotional side, which is normal, pretty normal for a female, but it's like, if we were to have this conversation, I would just be a hot mess. I would be so emotional. You would be distracted and by me crying, or I might say something I don't mean, and it's not productive sometimes to do it right that second. Mm-hmm. But I do remember the time that you came over and hugged me, and it was weird because it was like I was so mad at you, but I wanted to be comforted by you. Mm-hmm. And it's tricky when those two things are together. But I think so many women can relate to what I'm saying. Yeah. It's like, I'm so mad at you, but like, come over here and give me a hug.
But the reality is, you love me so much that even though you're mad at me, you're still willing to give me a crevice of a space.
Yeah, like I didn't shut you out.
For me to do something to show I'm not going anywhere.
Right. And your actions backed up that you are facing these things head on. If there was like no growth and no even effort on your end, and just I kept getting hurt and hurt and hurt, like it'd be different.
Right.
But I knew that you were heading in the right direction, but it was just uncomfortable in that moment for me. Yeah. It something was unlocked and kind of ripped open, but I knew I could trust you to keep healing.
But here's the thing. I feel like the reason why is because I'm not scared to do the hard things.
Yeah, you can't. But
I was before. I'm not anymore.
It's worth it.
I'm willing to endure my mess ups. I'm willing to accept my mess ups. I'm willing to accept when I fail, and I'm willing to be okay with it. Yeah. That takes a lot for people, and I'm not saying that that's easy, but is it possible? Absolutely. Right. This is why now my message, my expression is I'm willing to choose to do the hard things so that my life can get easier. Right. But when I try to when I desire for my life to be easy, it becomes difficult. Yeah. Because an easy life is just not possible.
Well, things are better when you kind of work for them.
Well, when you work for them, so when you do the hard things, life gets easier. But when we want an easy life, it's impossible. We can't have an easy life because we have to endure through the heartaches and through the walls, and we got to break down some barriers. Yeah. Got to break down some walls to get to a place where we can live a life that is content and that is satisfied and that is happy with what you have in your hands. Yeah. But that requires for us to do what is hard, right? So Paul talks about the thorn on his side. Right. And I love that he talks about this thing that he has. and that it is something that keeps him close to God.
Right. I always wondered what his thorn was.
And so,
You know?
yeah, there's a whole debate on that.
Yeah. Whole can of worms.
But what I'm trying to get at is that he acknowledges that there is something that is constantly causing conflict with him.
Yeah.
But he's willing to face it because he knows that that conflict brings him closer to Christ.
Yeah. And that's another thing is like, it's a skill set to be content.
Absolutely.
And at peace. And it's something you have to practice.
It's called humility.
Yeah. And if we're going to go into the brain science, you have to build neural pathways in your brain. So the more you go down a train of thought, the more that neural pathway in your brain opens up like it's a highway. Mm-hmm. So it's easier to go the highway than it is the little rabbit trail. Mm-hmm. And so if the highway is negative thinking, negative self-talk, all those types of things, that's most likely what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. But you have to find the rabbit trail and make that the highway instead. Mm-hmm. Positive thoughts, thinking what's the best thing that could happen instead of what's the worst thing that could happen.
Right.
And it's like the more you practice and do that,
right.
the more, just like any other habit you have, it will become easier with time.
Right.
And I'm still in that.
Yeah.
I feel like there's many times where I'm like, I'm not content. I'm not satisfied. I'm not this. I'm not that. And
so the power, so the power's in our tongue to declare life or death.
Right.
Right. That's what the Bible tells us.
Yeah.
So maybe what helps navigate those things is changing the way we word things.
Yeah.
So it's not that it happens, right? It's that it happened.
Right.
It's not a but.
Yeah, that's good.
It's an and.
Mm-hmm.
Two things can be true.
Yeah.
Right?
What do you mean?
Like two things can be true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So two things can be true is that I love my life and I've also made tons of mistakes.
Right. Like what I was talking about with therapy. Two things can be true. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so it's changing the wording around.
The wording. And so a good example of this would be like, say we get into a fight and you're always like, you always do this.
Right. And
that makes me feel not good.
Right.
It makes me feel like there's something wrong with me. Like, ooh, shoot. Like, do I do this? Instead of saying, why did you do this?
Right.
Like this one time is the only thing we're talking about.
And that opens a space for conversation.
Right.
Because what we do is when we say you always do this, because this is something that I did a lot. I don't know if I still do. Probably not.
I haven't noticed it lately.
So we can confidently say I stopped doing it, right?
I think so.
Okay, let's
Don't
hope.
do it later.
Let's hope we're
I'll
right.
call you out on it.
But what we tend to do is we say you always do this, and what we're doing is we're closing off the person,
right,
and not giving them an opportunity to have a conversation and talk about why they did what they did.
Yeah.
So it's changing the way that we word things. Mm-hmm. So maybe we need to stop saying you always do this and instead say, why did you do this?
Right.
What made you want to do this? Because now that opens up a space for conversation, and now we can talk about things, and now we can begin to process things. And then there's space for forgiveness.
Yes.
And then we can hold each other.
Yeah.
And then we can
connection.
Right? And
conflict
then
resolution.
and then we can get intimacy. Intimacy happens when there's a open line of communication.
Yeah. And I feel like when you are connected emotionally, intimacy, like physical intimacy, comes so much easier.
Yeah.
Like there's a definite connection there.
For sure. Yep.
But anyways, guys.
Yeah.
So
this
that's
has been
few of our...
Awesome. I love you, baby.
I love you too.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary to you.
I wouldn't dream of doing this life with anybody else but with you.
Oh, thank you.
Mental health was never a word in my vocabulary until I met you. And I'm grateful because I think God knew exactly what he was doing. When he gave me you, he realized that I needed to change, and I needed help for that. And he built you with the skin to deal with me. And so I just want to say in front of everybody that's listening that I appreciate you, boo-boo.
Thank you, babe. I love you.
I love you too.
And we love y'all.
We love y'all
So
deeply.
thanks for listening.
So thank you for listening to the Habitual Podcast, and we'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Peace.